Welcome to the Ultimate Dental Podcast, the place where you can learn how to create a dental practice and a business life that you love. Listen in with Dr. David Moffet as he interviews successful entrepreneurs and successful business people and successful dentists as they share their business successes, their stories, and their breakthrough ideas. Sharing pearls of wisdom that you can take back to your practice and implement immediately so that you can have that great practice with more patients, higher profits, and less stress. This is the podcast where great dental practices meet with successful business processes. Thanks for tuning in to the Ultimate Dental Podcast, the podcast where thought leaders, industry experts, and thriving practice owners reveal their very best tips, tools, and strategies that will help you to grow your dental practice faster. Now, here's your host, Dr. David Moffet.
Hi, everybody, and welcome to today's edition of the Ultimate Dental Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. David Moffet, in rural New South Wales, halfway between Sydney and Canberra. And today, my guest is Kelly O'Brien, who's in Manchester, in England. And it's early in the morning over there. So, Kelly, thanks for getting up so early, and thanks for joining us on the Ultimate Dental Podcast. It's a pleasure to have you on.
Thank you.
And Kelly, now you are a dental compliance consultant, and that's a tough job. It's a tough job to do, but it's also a tough job to get into. Now, you've told me that you began in dentistry as a dental nurse in 2000 and qualified in 2003, working in practices in private, NHS and corporate, and that you've enjoyed roles in senior nursing, assistant management, and dental practice management, where you progressed from those roles into compliance management and business management, training many dental nurses, receptionists, and practice managers, guiding and mentoring them through their job roles and courses, and that you've enjoyed being a part of successful CQC inspections, which has brought you to where you are now. Dental compliance is your true passion. Now, I've got a really good friend in Texas, in America, who's a dental compliance specialist. And in fact, he was an inspector and he didn't like what he was seeing in terms of the people that were trying to do the right thing, but just missing out on a couple of little things here and there. So tell me about dental compliance and what you see your role in dental compliance as being, and also what you see for, I guess, the future of dentistry with dental compliance going forwards.
Yeah, I actually really enjoy dental compliance. A lot of people find it highly boring. I get a lot of whys, ifs, buts. Do we have to do this? And unfortunately, you do. I really enjoy it. I like the T's to be crossed and the I's to be dotted. I love going into practices where I can spot what they need, where I can help them, and what the impact of me coming in, how that can help the whole team. And I love seeing the outcome and the way a practice flows once I've been in there and helped them. And I do think that once compliance is in place, the whole team, the whole practice, everything runs that little bit smoother. Um, yes, so I actually really do enjoy going in and figuring out what practices need, where I can help, and taking it from there, really.
So compliance, as a practicing dentist for 35 years, compliance is the holy grail. 100% compliance is nearly impossible. There's always going to be something that dentists are either missing or they're trying to avoid doing. When you see a practice, is it just an accident that they're missing stuff, or do you actually see practices where they're cutting corners and that's really dangerous?
Both. So there will be practices where the missing things that have just been overlooked or that they didn't realise that they needed. As you'll know, dental compliance is extremely over-regulated, I do believe. some of the things I think are a little bit extensive that practices have to do, and that's where they generally miss things because they don't understand the extensiveness of what's required. Practices that do cut corners, they can be the hard ones to work with because you can lead a horse to water, but you can't always make it drink. And that can sometimes be problematic. Again, those practices that do cut the corners and don't generally want to put the work or the costs or the time into getting the compliance up to speed, I do enjoy also working with those, especially when you can see the turnaround and the change of attitude and the way they see dental compliance, and the way they want to then adapt it to their practices. Dangerous corners being cut, it's a difficult one really, because if I do go into a practice and they refuse and they don't want to get on board, I sometimes do have to walk away, as in, if I can't turn this around and you don't want to, I don't want to necessarily work alongside people who want to cut dangerous corners, because I do believe that it's not the best outcome for the patient in the long run.
That's a difficult thing for you because it's really you're in fact observing a crime,
Yeah.
a criminal act, and your duty as a law-abiding citizen is to report the crime so that the public aren't harmed by those purposeful errors.
It's a very difficult area to be in when you're in that situation. But yes, I do have a duty of care, mainly to the patients and the staff that are around the perpetrators who are not following dental compliance. And it does put you in a very difficult situation, unfortunately. However, that is part of my job role.
One of the difficulties, I guess, in those sort of practices is that if the practice gets shut down because of a compliance issue, then everybody's out of a job. It's not just the practice owner who's financially
Yeah.
disadvantaged. All the staff who rely on their
Yeah.
salaries, and doesn't the practice owner realise that?
I would say 99.9% of the time, yes, but have come up against some sticky situations, not whereby I've had to report anybody, but have had to come home and have a long think about, can we move forward with this individual? Is it going to get to a stage where I'm going to have to report this person? Unfortunately, for them and for me, it didn't come to that, and we did get on board, but it was a long road.
My goodness, I guess what are the simple things that dentists or dental practices are missing that they really should be doing that are easily fixed, but if a regulator comes to their door, they could be closed down. What are those simple things that they go, oh, I didn't realize I had to do that? What would those be?
The simplest way would to have good structure and protocols in place and ensure you've got the staff to follow through with the compliance. I find going into practices, a lot of the problems stem from being understaffed. So the first thing that gets pushed aside is the dental compliance, because you need someone sat front of house on your reception. You need a nurse in the surgery with the dentist or the whichever clinician is in that day. And it's the compliance that gets slipped aside. Then staff are not necessarily taking the correct training and courses to stay on top of the compliance, and small things start to slip. Maintenance of equipment tends to be one where they've not had their annual maintenance checks on equipment, which then knocks things out like liability insurance, and certain things like that, which then it knocks everything out where it comes to fire, legionella, health and safety, infection control, and it spirals out of control. So it's the little things that tend to lead to the big things that get overlooked.
My goodness, that's I guess when you look at outside of dentistry and you look at businesses that go bankrupt, one of the first things that is a warning sign is that they fail to service their their equipment and their vehicles. And so they think they're actually saving money by not doing that, but they're actually on a slippery slope of sending their business closer to the wall than they should be.
Yeah, it's definitely the small things. There was a practice that I went into, for an example, their autoclave servicing. So they were cutting corners, as in saving, I think it was £150 a year, which doesn't sound like a lot. But to this practice owner, they didn't want to spend this extra £150, and they wasn't having all three aspects of their autoclave service. So they wasn't having their service, their pressure vessel, and their general inspection on their autoclave being done. They were only having two of those services done, which in terms then, if you were to get inspected or your liability insurance, you're not actually covered for your autoclave at all. So the £350 that was being spent was actually useless because they weren't spending the other £150 to have the whole servicing as a collective, which meant that autoclave shouldn't have been in use. They wasn't insured for their pressure vessel if anything bad was to happen. And actually, there was instruments being sterilised. Luckily, the staff were checking every day that they were passing the general test for the instruments to be autoclaved. But on a bigger scale, if you were to look further into the compliance side of it, that autoclave, realistically, from an insurance and health and safety point of view, shouldn't have been being used.
That's crazy, Kelly, because that's like £3 a week, or
Yeah,
60p a day, and if you're seeing 10 patients, that's 6p per patient. Like it's
yeah.
peanuts to stay on top of the cost. Uh, but somebody decided, oh, I don't need that, and they run the risk, and everything that you just said is voided as a result
Yeah.
of them cutting that corner. That's scary.
It was a general oversight of a practice owner who was going, we don't need all three of those inspections. You do. If you come in and get inspected, they want to see that you have all three certificates, um, along with your written scheme to be able to use that pressure vessel. And I think it is something that practices sometimes oversee because they just think, well, we don't need all that. We just need a general inspection every year on the autoclave. It's not as simple as that.
So for any dentist who all of a sudden is watching this and listening to this and saying, oh, maybe I need to go back to the start and start getting my compliance in order from the beginning, where do they start? Obviously, they call you, but where would you start going into a practice and saying, we think our compliance needs an overhaul. Let's start with the letter A and work our way through the alphabet. How do they start?
I have set out in folders when I take my laptop out of all the folders of complaints. I think I've got about 20 to 23 at the moment, all different aspects of dental compliance. I generally start with things like infection control because I believe if your infection control's in place, then the staff are doing something right. Um, if the infection control is out, then generally you've got more to look at. If it's a safe environment for the patient, where the health and safety is concerned, safeguarding, background checks on all your staff. So I like to go through all personal folders to make sure everything's there that's needed from a recruitment process. And then I take it from there. I would then look at things like fire, legionnaires. I do take a look at radiation, but I like to do that alongside whoever's in charge of the radiation because ideally it should be them who does this. I'd then like to have a look at all your manuals, make sure all your servicings are checked. General policies, I will go over general policies and some HR. The CQC, when they come in to inspect now, they don't want to just see a shiny policy that is pristine and been overlooked and updated once a year. They want to see that who's written that policy understands what's in there, they know how to implement it, and that all the protocols and processes are in place. So I do like to work with staff from that aspect of having a shiny policy away somewhere in a folder or on a PC is useless if people don't know where to find it and how to use it. So I start with infection control, COSH, safeguarding, and take it from there and lead to the more extensive stuff from that point of view. If we can get all that in place, the other stuff it'll all fall together.
You mentioned earlier about Steri being the last thing, on a practice owner's mind. They want a designated receptionist, they want designated dental assistants, and I see this often where they get the receptionist to go and do some Steri while the patient's being treated, even if the phone will ring, or somebody could walk in. Steri is considered a little bit of a bits and pieces sort of role. When I see a practice that's got a designated Steri person, and I've seen one dentist practices with a designated Steri person, those practices, it's everything is in order. The Steri room is in order. They know what goes out, they know what has to come back. But when I see what I just described, where the dental assistant is not even sterilizing her own equipment that she's used while she's been with the dentist, and somebody else is, they lose handpieces, they lose scalers, they lose scaler tips because nobody knew what got used, because a different person than the one who was in the treatment room is now cleaning up. And then those practices have the hide of then swapping roles the next day. And so stuff just goes missing. And so the cost of replacing equipment is way more than actually having a designated Steri person in charge. And as you've just described, it's really dangerous not having somebody designated to, have the manual and know what has to be done.
I would like to think that all nurses would be capable of taking over their own infection control and sterilising their own instruments. It is great when you go into practices and see that they've got a designated decontamination nurse. That nurse takes over the whole role of the sterilisation process, and if it's run in a steady way, it definitely works for practices. Unfortunately, here in the UK, and I'm not sure where you are, David, we have such a shortage of dental nurses at the moment that practices trying to employ someone just to do decontamination is nearing impossible, because practices are generally running off a lot of locum staff at the moment, which again, as you said, things go missing, things get lost. It becomes quite an expensive day if handpieces have gone in the bin, scaling tips have gone missing, burrs, things like that are generally not being put back where they belong. It's difficult.
Yeah, it's frightening, and often, when I coach practices, any problem, if we unpack it back along to the beginning, we find that the problem that they're trying to solve is being caused by something else along the way. We fix that, and then everything else disappears. And so exactly what you said, you're having staff going through the bins at the end of the day looking for scaler tips. If we fixed it at the start, even if it just means you have two dental assistants, and the one who finishes with the patient then takes their instrument out and cleans them and understands, I used all that, so here it goes, and then they put another dental assistant in. That's how we used to run it in our practice. So it's just like one room, one dental assistant, and set up for the next
Yeah.
one, and the dentist went from back and forwards, and there was no compliance issues because of that.
I generally find if you've got the same people working together in the same room, there's more responsibility taken for that equipment and for seeing what they're going to need in a few hours for the next day, and ensuring that their own equipment goes back where it belongs. If you've got different nurses, different clinicians in and out of different rooms, locum staff, and then like you say, the odd day you've got a decontamination nurse, I personally don't think it works. And the practices that I go into, I see this, it doesn't work. It causes chaos. Um, but in a real world at the moment, to have the same people working together in the same room every day, it's not practical. Not everybody works 5 days a week anymore. Go back 10 years ago, most clinicians and nurses did work Monday to Friday, 9 till 5. Practices are open from 7 a.m. till 7, 8 o'clock in the evening now. They're open weekends. People are working more conjuncted hours over shorter days. So it generally, you don't get the same nurses with the same clinicians anymore, unfortunately.
Well, that not only does that affect the mechanism of the running of the treatment, but also for the patients, Kelly, it sends a message. Oh, who have I got today? You know, I haven't got Batman and Robin. I haven't got Tom and Jerry. I haven't got the Lone Ranger and Silver. You know, I've got Batman and Silver. I've got Tom and Tonto,
Yeah,
and they go, who is that person? And like I said, they switch reception back to dental assistant so that everybody gets to know what everybody does. Patient comes in and goes, "Didn't you take my money last week? Now you're in the mixing it up."
yes, it becomes confusing, yeah, to the patient. And the when we get inspected here, they want to look at the key lines of inquiries. They want to see a practice is safe, effective, well led, and part of that is people being steady in their roles, so that when a patient walks through the door, they know who the receptionists are, they know who their dentist is. And okay, they might not always have the same nurse, but at least seeing the same faces in the roles that they expect to see them in, it gives the patients comfort, um, and a knowing of who's going to be there and what their role is within the practice. And it definitely does put patients at ease. Patients coming through the door, and like you say, who am I going to be seeing today? And oh, well, how long have they worked here? I've never met them before. When did they qualify as a dentist? And I hear that a lot. Are they qualified?
Oh, really?
Yeah, you do hear it from patients quite a lot. Oh, well, I've not heard of them before. I've not seen them before. When did they qualify? Are they qualified? And what I don't think what patients realise is that the checks that go into ensuring that that clinicians and all dental staff are qualified, registered, indemnified. Like, these checks are imperative, and I would say majority of practices do them. I would like to say about 95%. You do go into practices though where some checks haven't been done, where they think, oh, well, I've got your qualification, I can see that you're registered, and I can see that you're indemnified, but they've never followed through on checks of where they've worked before, and certain things like that, where that means that that personal folder, there's holes in it. But generally, checks are being done, but you do hear it of patients wanting to know, are they qualified? And that baffles me sometimes, but I get why they ask it, because it's a new face again when they've come in for the dental checkup.
Yeah, no, it is scary. Tell me, for a practice owner, the penalties we've touched on it. They could have their practice closed down if it's a serious breach. What what's the worst? Have you seen practices just closed down, never to be reopened? Um,
Not personally that I've been involved with, but I have heard of a few. It's very hard to get closed down. You've got to be doing something really, really wrong. And when you are getting inspected, these guys aren't coming out to catch you out. They're not trying to trip you up at every corner. They're there to help you along the way and check that what you're doing is correct, advise you if there's anything that's missing, or anything that is incorrect, and they'll give you a time frame to put that in place. So they're not there to come and necessarily shut you down. You've got to be doing something really, really bad to be shut down.
Yeah, okay. And so, what's a minor breach that would be maybe a fine or let's fix that up, or a warning? What would be a minor breach? And in terms of a fine, how much is a small fine? How much is uh, a warning?
So when they come out and inspect, they generally pick up on things um, like risk assessments not being in place or followed through, um, medical things missing out of medical emergency equipment, um, audits not being done. So it tends to be minor things, and they'll generally give you a couple of weeks to put these in place. If it was something severe, they may want to come out and re-inspect. But severe things would be um, horrendous breaches in infection control, not having services done, missing quite a lot of things like your medical emergency bag. It would have to be a real mess for them to say immediate closure today.
Okay. Do dentists in the UK have to wear scrubs? Are they not allowed to wear civilians' clothing, or can they wear a gown over their civilian clothing?
So generally scrubs, and you can wear a gown over your scrubs if you want to. So we have medical uniforms whereby you get changed in the practice, and that would be your scrubs and your footwear. And then we don't go outside in those.
Yeah, it's funny. When I left my practice and I went to work for one near my home, the owner would turn up in her scrubs from home, driven from home, and I used to leave my scrubs there. And one day I'm going, "Where's my top?" And another dentist was wearing it. I'm going, hang on, that's not what's meant to happen. So it's kind of weird. But even with gowns, that say you're going to the bathroom, can't wear your gown out to the bathroom.
No, you take it off and change it.
Mm, mm,
Practices are inundated with gowns at the moment due to the COVID pandemic,
mm.
as they were only generally used before if you were doing something surgical. And then it became that these had to be worn for every patient, changed for every patient, huge amounts of clinical waste, which again is in the process of changing here, clinical waste, how we dispose of that. So practices, you go in and generally they've got huge cellars that are full of boxes and boxes of gowns that people don't really wear anymore unless they've gone back to pre-COVID, wear them if they need to for something surgical.
Yeah, because they're disposable gowns now.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's gone are the days of.
Beginning of the pandemic, we did have washable ones because the disposable ones were difficult to um get hold of. But let me tell you, trying to wash 20 gowns and hang them up somewhere and have them dry, that was not an easy job for anybody.
No, no, very difficult indeed. Tell me about the background checks on employees. What's expected now?
So from a recruitment point of view, you would check all qualifications, registrations, indemnity. You would then DBS check, so an enhanced DBS check, so that they can work with vulnerable adults and children to make sure that there's no nasties in somebody's past. You would get reference checks. So first reference is immediate last employer. Second reference can be a character reference or a previous employer somewhere down the line. If somebody doesn't have a previous employer, it can be generally two references, character references from as long as it's not a family member, so it can be friend, family friend, neighbour, someone from say it's a school leaver, someone from a college. Um, yeah, but making sure that all those checks are in place is imperative.
Yeah, really, really, really important in this day and age that we do the background checks. But again, now it's a little bit different. If somebody rings you for a background check, uh, are you allowed to be honest?
So we From a recruitment point of view, if I was recruiting somebody, I wouldn't be allowed to just ring somebody up and obtain a reference over the phone. I would send it by email and have them fill out a general reference form for me and email it back. Then a general conversation could be had over the phone. But if somebody was to ring me and ask me for a reference over the phone, I certainly wouldn't do that. I wouldn't know generally who these people are, so from a data protection point of view, I certainly wouldn't give out anybody's information. It would have to be done formally via email or in writing.
Scary. We once had somebody had to leave our employment because they stole, and while the courts were waiting to deal with them, they actually gave our practice name as a reference while they went for another job.
Oh no. Yeah. Stealing's a funny one. I have come across it in the past. Generally where practices run off a lot of cash in the past. A lot of practices now generally don't take much cash. It's all done by card machine, bank transfer, dental practice plans where they're paid monthly on a scheme. So there's not that much cash floating around dental practices anymore where there used to be. And it is a sad day when you've got to get rid of somebody from that point of view. When it comes to a reference, when you've had to get rid of somebody and then they want a reference, here in the UK, because of um, lots of different reasons, but mainly that not wanting to be sued, you would just refuse to give a reference point blank, and no reference gives another employer the answers that they're looking for without you then giving certain information out. If you had all your everything surely in place and you were happy if a solicitor came to look over your dismissal process and how you followed that through, and you were confident enough, absolutely put in there why you dismissed someone. But you would have to be 100% confident that from a point of view of being sued, was your dismissal process 100% followed through legally from start to finish. So a lot of places now just won't give references.
Yeah, and I guess as you said, not giving a reference is as good as giving a poor reference in this day and
Yeah.
age. Yes.
The only other way to look at that is the corporates here now. Some of the bigger corporates here in the UK generally won't give you a reference. They will just give you, Mr. Smith did work here from 2019 to 2023 and did do this job role, just for confirmation. And that is, again, they don't want to get into the legalities of being sued. So sometimes it's a bit of a grey area. If someone's come from a corporate, you might need to dig a bit further and get other references for them.
Yeah, yeah, and the other thing is that some people are really good at just keeping ahead of the referee and moving from employment to employment to employment. That their background checks are never done thoroughly.
Yeah, the problem I find here when I go into practices is that they urgently need staff. So in that employment process, they're going, okay, we will start you and we'll wait for your DBS check. We'll wait for your references. And sometimes it can be 6 and 8 weeks down the line. DBS check still hasn't been done. References haven't been obtained because they've not been emailed back. Before you know it, that they've already become part of the team, and then these things get missed.
We had somebody come from an agency to do some temp work for us. Somebody who had worked for us, and we had dismissed them. And when they turned up to do the temp work, they turned up wearing their mask.
Oh, what?
So nobody realised who it was until we got her employment declaration form. We go, what's she doing here? And we had to ring the agency and say, you can't believe that she actually had the hide to turn up wearing a mask.
Well, yeah, to actually turn up. Another thing that I see practices miss here is all those documents that you need to employ somebody. You also need to see those documents from the agency. and practices don't always realise that. So if someone's even coming to do 1 day's work, you need that agency to be emailing you over all of those documents as if you were going to be employing that member of staff. And I do see practices missing that. And that is just an oversight. It's an oversight from the practice owners, practice managers, oversight from the agencies as well, because the agencies are sat there going, well, I know I've got all these documents. If you want them, ask me for them. They're saving that time, not automatically email them out when a locum comes out.
In terms of surgery design, and you touched on this briefly, the days of doing everything in one room all over the place is now gone. You've got to have a designated dirty side and a clean side, and you can't, there's no snakes and ladders. You can't cut corners. You can't go up and back. It's got to be in a circle. One of the things that I'm still seeing in terms of dental practice design is that the designers are putting the steri and a lab in the same room. Like, how wrong is that? Shouldn't that be outlawed?
Yeah, it should definitely be a separate room. Decontamination room needs to be designated purely for decontamination.
But mixing up plaster in dirty alginates, right beside clean instruments, it's just I don't know how they get away with popping that down in terms of that's instrument flow and sterilization flow. But the other thing,
Yeah.
Kelly, even in surgery design, they don't design them so that, I'm looking at one design at the moment where they've got an X-ray up one end, then two offices, and then two checkout offices, and then they've got a front desk, and then they've got treatment rooms, and people are going to be going around in circles, bumping into people instead of just like, it should be just like a Disney ride. There's an entrance and an exit, and nobody goes back.
Yeah, a lot of older practices are poorly designed. Um, and that's down to size, buildings. Newer practices, I've been going into a fairly new practice here in Manchester, working with a perio surgeon, which has been interesting. And this practice is phenomenal. Um, the equipment's out of this world. The design of it is out of this world. It's a beautiful, beautiful place to go and work in. And you can see the difference in newer practices, the way they're being designed and the way they're being outlaid and the designated rooms compared to the older practices. Older practices tend to be in older buildings, converted houses, and I'm not sure how they get round those problems.
No, it's difficult. So, if your advice would be, if you were relocating or setting up a dental practice, that one of the first things they should look at is sterilization and instrument flow, and getting a compliance expert to at least lay down a plan for the layout so things move smoothly rather than having a jumble.
Yeah, definitely. I do believe when a new practice opens, and I'm in the process of helping one of those at the moment, um, a good roadmap from the off is what you need, and it needs to be followed. Um, yeah, I'll be able to give you some more information on this new practice that's opening in a few weeks, hopefully, and the processes of what I've done to help them. So I'm really looking forward to it, actually.
Now, in designing that for that owner, are you suggesting some things that never crossed their mind?
Um, yeah, so the design of the surgeries, um, you would be surprised when designers come in and go, yeah, we can put these units here and the chair here and da, da, da. It's not actually being thought out from a clinician and a nurse's point of view. Things tend to be put on the wrong sides of the rooms, and equipment that are out of reach, like you say, over the other side of the room. Decontamination rooms as well, getting the flow right, making sure that you flow from dirty all the way round to clean. Um, yeah, and another one that I've suggested, and it's not something that's necessarily needed, but I know that staff prefer it, is a separate bathroom for staff to patients.
At,
Something simple.
Absolutely. In fact, I'm talking to a client at the moment about this, and I just can't think that any patient would want to go into a bathroom when they see that the dentist come out of the bathroom and the dentist has just had to do a number two. Like, well, how wrong can that be? You know, it should be staff and patients separate, and not even side by side. Um, it's yeah, I don't, that I don't understand at all, and it's funny. It's funny to think that that's what happened. But people will judge your dental practice on how clean your toilets are.
Yeah, practices from an environmental cleaning point of view should be going into the patient bathrooms twice a day and signing off that they've been checked and cleaned round. Does this happen in an ideal world? You would like to think it does. Not always. I did go into a practice where there was one bathroom, staff and patients, and there was coats hung up, there was bags hung up, there was trainers on the floor. Yeah, and I just thought, oh, this isn't exactly what patients should be coming into. But that was the only bathroom they had, and not much storage to put anyone's belongings, unfortunately. So everything was clumped in the bathroom.
Oh my goodness! It's time for a new office location.
Yeah, these are small things that, with a bit of thought path can be rectified. But yeah, going into new practices, and helping them from opening up and getting their compliance in place. I'm enjoying doing this at the moment,
Mm.
with this practice.
Now, you've been a compliance expert for how long?
So I went into compliance about 4 years ago now. Um, yeah, about 4 years.
But there's no, once you're on that mission, there's no going back. As we said at the start, it's very hard to find absolute perfection. So you can help every dental practice do something better.
Yeah, but there is no perfect. Every dental practice is different. Every practice does things slightly differently and may use different things. They'll use different compliance companies. They'll use different equipment. They'll work slightly different as a team. But as long as the end game and the end result is is to get there and get to that point, then surely that is the point. Um, but yeah, 4 years I've been doing it, and I enjoy it. Every day is different. I come across lots of different things, lots of different practices, different opinions, but I do enjoy it.
That's wonderful, and that's nothing exudes more than job satisfaction, and you can see that that's what you really enjoy doing. And as we've said, it's a career that has no end, because there will always need to be some form of regulation and compliance, and your role to help dentists to avoid making simple mistakes that can be a risk for the patient, a risk for the owner, and a risk for the staff. I think it's an admirable job that you're doing, Kelly, and I'm really glad that you're doing it with such passion. Um, if anybody wants to get in touch with you, somebody in the UK or somebody in Europe who wants to find out more about how you can help them in their practice, what's the best way for them to get in touch with you?
Email, telephone, LinkedIn, any of those.
All right. So I've got your email, I've got your telephone, and I've got your LinkedIn. So I'll have those in the notes at the end of this recording, and I'll also have them in the notes that come out with the various podcast platforms as well. So Kelly O'Brien, thank you very much for getting up early on this Monday morning in Manchester. And I've got to ask you this: is it raining?
No, but it's very grey.
So, so I once heard that if you look out the window in Manchester and it's not raining, there's only one thing that's for certain: it will rain.
It looks like it probably is going to.
Yeah. So anyway, thank you, Kelly. Appreciate your time this morning, your time, and look forward to helping you to really grow your compliance business and be of assistance to dentists in the UK and in Europe and maybe even around the world. Kelly O'Brien, thanks for joining us on the Ultimate Dental Podcast.
Thanks, David.
Thank you for tuning in to another inspiring episode of the Ultimate Dental Podcast. We appreciate each and every one of you for being part of our dental community and joining us each week on this incredible journey. If you found value in today's episode and you don't want to miss out on future episodes packed with expert insights and actionable strategies, here's how you can stay connected with us. Firstly, hit that subscribe button. Whether you're listening on your favourite podcast platform or watching on our website, subscribing ensures you'll never miss an episode. Secondly, share the love. If you know a fellow dentist or colleague who could benefit from the wisdom and knowledge that we share here, please share our podcast with them. Also, please share the podcast on your socials by simply clicking on the social icons wherever you view or listen to this podcast. Together, we can all do our bit to elevate the dental profession. And finally, stay engaged with us. We love hearing from you. Your questions, comments, and feedback fuel our mission to provide the best content for your professional growth, your personal growth, and for your practice growth. Remember, your journey to creating a dental practice and a business life that you love is our mission, and we're excited to be your trusted guide along the way. Thank you for being a part of the Ultimate Dental Podcast. Until next time, keep smiling, keep striving, and keep on tuning in to the Ultimate Dental Podcast.